Good evening. Today I will be talking about the roles of masculinity in colonial inherited culture throughout history. More specifically, I will be looking at the traits that have been inherited through the culture of America, starting with the roles men have in American slave times, as well as modern traits or roles that men have in today's culture. Have the colonial imposed roles and traditions of men remained, or have they changed in today's society? First, we will be looking at the book Kindred by Octavia Butler. This will be our reference for the masculine roles in the American slave era of society. In this book, Butler does an incredible job at describing the life of a slave-owning family in Baltimore, Maryland, around the years of 1820 to 1840. In this telling, a black woman, Dana, who is married to a white man, Kevin, manages to travel back and forth in time from her home in Altadena, California, to the troublesome slave plantation of the Whalen family against her will. Now, Dana and Kevin are from the 1900s, so there is a wide gap of time that they travel through. Focusing on the father and the owner of the plantation, Tom, as well as his son Rufus, Butler manages to encapsulate the ideologies and masculine roles that these men would have around 200 years ago. Since these men owned slaves, there are major differences compared to modern-day men. Kevin is a key part to understanding the differences between a somewhat modern take on masculinity and comparing it to American slave-era masculinity. One instance of this direct comparison can be shown when Kevin is taken back in time with Dana. To blend into the time, Kevin must act as if he owns Dana as property. In this time, the white man is supposed to be the figurehead of the family. They own the property, tend to it, as well as create children. Being a white man meant that you had all the power you wanted, and in this instance can be seen in the first time Dana is teleported back in time. She has just saved Rufus from drowning, which at this point in the story we did not know who he was. It was then Tom who enters and immediately has a gun in Dana's face. Of course, we must acknowledge the factor of race in this topic, and that the fact that Dana is a black woman who is confronted by a white man should not be overlooked. However, this merely makes further claim to the almost minor evolution masculinity has gone through. Meanwhile, while Dana saves this unknown child from drowning, his mother Margaret does nothing but scream that her child is dying in Dana's hands. Again, in this era, the female of the family is almost trained to do nothing but be a pretty face and to be the mother of the children in the house. Since they owned slaves, the woman would not cook or clean, but rather oversee the in-house slaves, almost never leaving the house since there was no reason to. The relationship between Tom and Margaret is pretty spotty at best. To Tom, Margaret is almost a nuisance. Tom does everything. He manages the property, transactions, and is the overall arm that swings the hammer. This is a large contrast to the relationship that Dana shares with Kevin. Kevin and Dana form a more cohesive bond with each other. They actively show their love and support to one another, and it's no surprise that they're married. Kevin wants what is best for Dana and will seek out to do anything for her, but Dana will also do the same. In their relationship, it is a 50-50 split between the work, labor, and caring for each other. If we shift to a relationship between a black man and black woman on the Whalen plantation, we see a similar experience to Dana and Kevin. Alice and Isaac's marriage, as well as Carrie and Nigel, all whom which are slaves, are the two marriages who would be the opposite of Tom and Margaret's. They also love each other and would do anything to make sure their significant other is okay. So what roles can we derive from this colonial inherited culture from the mid-1800s? We can assume that in a white household, the man owns the property, pays the bills, and is the grunt work of the house, involving the outdoors or anything physical. Since there is limited telling of the workings of a black family, I can only infer that it would be slightly like that of a white household, where the man does the grunt of the work, mostly outside involving physical strength, and the woman would remain indoors to cook, clean, and be a mother to their children. Comparing that to modern roles in society, we have moved past the masculine roles set by colonialization. As we look at the television show Married at First Sight, this is a show about two people who get married without knowing each other, who first meet on their wedding day. In this specific episode, Jasmine and Will sit down after marrying and have some of their first conversations. Jasmine asks Will what he thinks about gender roles, to which Will makes a joke about her cooking. However, Will does say that he would do the manly jobs of the house, like taking out the trash. He also adds that he thinks major things like bills should be split 50-50. Jasmine is taken back and disagrees, saying that she wants the man to be the protector of the house and be its provider. So who is in the wrong here? To colonial standards, Jasmine's views are to the standards set a long time ago, while Will takes the modern approach of splitting the household tasks evenly. Again, to not leave out race, Jasmine and Will are both black, but would it really be any different if the couple was white? Personally, I've found that right now in the current era, there are still ancient colonialist views on relationships. I experience the influence of the methods of protection and wanting to care for a significant other, but I also understand that there should be a split of the work done in the relationship. Unlike Tom and Margaret, the view should be more like Kevin and Dana. Race can ultimately factor into the masculine roles set into a relationship, as seen in Kindred, but how much of a factor is gender? As we see in the Married at First Sight video, Jasmine wants it to be like a colonial-influenced relationship. Ultimately, the reason for colonial influence on modern relationships is due to the option to want what you want and to be able to do anything you want as your gender. In the 1840s, there was no option to split the relationship because women did not have the same rights that men did. However, today, with women having the same rights as men, they can abolish the gender roles that were set, meaning that the masculine role will almost always be influenced by the colonial ideologies of the set gender roles. And thank you very much.